Getting inspired by other people's projects and portfolio websites is a great idea, especially when you're just getting started. But if you take it too far, it will leave you wishing that you never created a portfolio in the first place. Sometimes inspiration turns into plagiarism, or it comes really, really close to plagiarism. So I'm not just referring to like directly copying and pasting from someone's website, pasting it on your own and calling that work your own, but that has happened. I've had hiring managers reach out to me and say, hey, I found this project on someone else's site, but it's also on your website. Like, what's going on with this? And yeah, they literally did copy portfolio projects and put them on their site saying they created them. So I imagine every single one of you watching this knows not to do that, because that will definitely backfire very heavily. But what I see much more often is people will share their portfolio sites and say, hey, I just got this done, and I'll open it up, and it's almost a carbon copy of someone else's portfolio website, maybe one from the showcase or one from someone who's been in the field for a long time. And it's almost like the layout is the same, the navigation is the same, even some of the language is almost the same, but like the images are swapped out and maybe the language is like mostly swapped around. So that's what I'm referring to, and I don't think people are doing this because they're like, oh, I'm going to copy this person and I'm going to present it as my own. I think the reason that happens is because, yeah, people just are like, oh, this is a really good site. If I can do this, I'm going to be in good shape. But then it winds up looking like a carbon copy. And if I can look at it and say, hey, this looks just like this other person's website, if that person can look at it and feel really upset because it feels like their work got ripped off, odds are other people in the field are going to see it too. This isn't a very big field. It's a pretty small field. Most of the good portfolios out there, everyone has seen. So if we all can see it, a hiring manager is probably going to see it too. And that's not going to be a very good first impression when they're looking at your portfolio and they're wondering why it looks like a ripoff of another portfolio that they know and like. So that's what we're trying to avoid. And if that doesn't apply to you, you should still get some value out of this. I'm going to include some quotes from this book, Steal Like an Artist, Austin Kleon. If the only value you get out of this video is to go ahead and check out this book, I highly recommend you do so. It's short, it's fun, it has nice like illustrations and whatnot in it. Just an overall very inspiring read, regardless of whether or not this plagiarism thing is an issue for you. So we're going to dive into some quotes. So here's the first one. This is kind of the premise. All creative work builds on what came before. Nothing is completely original. We've probably all heard some form of this quote before, and we get that, right? Like if you go far back enough in time or you expand your scope wide enough, you're going to find the same ideas, the same advice, the same stuff over and over. So keeping that in mind, how do we approach this portfolio building process? Well, in the beginning, we learn by pretending to be our heroes. We learn by copying. That's another quote from the book. And I think that this is great advice. I think, and this is how a lot of us learn. So copying is good. Okay, so a lot of you probably start by copying. That's probably how we wind up in these situations, thinking that copying the portfolio is like a good next step. So if you're recreating e-learning interactions or portfolio or projects or even portfolio websites, that's a good idea because that's how you're going to learn the tools of the trade. So if you try to reverse engineer projects that you really enjoy and learn how to build them on your own, that's going to build up your skill set. That's going to build your own confidence that you can build the stuff that is on other people's portfolios. It's a good idea. Even better, not just knowing how to build the project that they built, trying to understand the thinking behind how it was created, that's going to take you even further. Trying to understand why and how the person made the decisions that they made. If you can learn to think like that person, that skill is going to take you much further, and you're going to be able to apply that to a lot of other projects, and it's going to be a lot more invisible so that it doesn't feel like you're just tracing someone else's project. Now, copying is good, again, especially when you're new, when you're trying to learn. Definitely do this. Do the copying, but don't include those projects on your portfolio. That's where it becomes a problem. So, in other words, don't plagiarize people's work. Don't present that work as your own. And even if it's, you're changing the words and so on and so forth, if the layout is the same and the style is the same, it's going to backfire. So don't copy the layout and style and just change the text and images. That's just as good as plagiarism in most people's eyes. And it's going to hurt the people who did that work because it feels like other people are, benefiting off of the hundreds of hours of very hard work that they put in without any credit. And that is the other piece of this. If you are heavily inspired by someone's work and you do want to highlight that work on your portfolio, at the very least, we want to give credit of where that work came from. And it doesn't have to be a huge thing. You could, in the write-up, you could say, hey, I saw this project, I really liked it, and I wanted to see if I could recreate it and build a riff off of that, essentially. It's good to acknowledge that, and it's even better if you get the person's permission to include that in your portfolio and to acknowledge that and to link back to their site. There's nothing wrong with giving that credit where it's due. It's actually will probably help you build relationships in the industry, and it's just a more honest approach to including this type of work on your portfolio. Now, the other option is to copy, in quotes, from more sources. So instead of finding one person's project or portfolio that you really like, copying 90% of it and swapping out the text, you can copy different elements from different people's portfolios or go even wider than that. So here's another good quote from Steal Like an Artist. The writer Wilson Milsner said, if you copy from one author, it's plagiarism, but if you copy from many, it's research. And the same idea applies here in the ID and e-learning space. No one's going to be able to know something's a knockoff if you've copied 10 plus different elements from 10 plus different sources. It's not a knockoff at that point. You've used some creative vision and direction to bring together all of those disparate pieces. And that's where some of the most interesting projects are coming from that we're seeing in the e-learning space right now. So that's copying done right. Draw from many sources for inspiration instead of just one or a couple. Look beyond the showcase. I know a lot of you, especially those of you who are fans of the channel and our approach, you're looking at the showcase a lot for your portfolio inspiration, and a lot of you are doing really well at following our approach that we teach here on the channel, in the bootcamp, and on the showcase. But you can look beyond that, and looking beyond that will get you some really good inspiration for things that you can do to make your site and your project stand out even more. You can also look beyond instructional design. And this is where I think a lot of those most interesting pieces are going to come. You can look into the design space more generally, the motion design space, the user experience space, look at UX portfolios. You can even get inspiration from advertising, marketing, and print advertisements and print information design that you see out in the real world. So if you can draw things together from these pieces and build a mood board to collect it all in one place, that obviously goes deeper. We're not going to get into mood boarding in this video, but drawing inspiration from many sources and then putting it together with your own unique spin on it, that is going to be a really effective project. So turn your sources into something new instead of sending the message that you're very closely copying someone else's work. So here's another quote. Merely imitating your heroes is not flattering them. Transforming their work into something of your own is how you flatter them. So if you want even bonus points, mention the places you got inspired from, but then also talk about how you turn that into something of your own. And I'm not going to get too deep into it, but Steal Like an Artist, again, goes into how to approach this even better. I will talk about one idea on the how-to, and I love this idea. I haven't heard of this before reading this book. It's about building your creative lineage. It's really, really cool. It's essentially a family tree of the people who inspire you. And then the idea is that once you've built this family tree and you've studied all of these people, you can start building your own branch where you fit into that family tree. So I love this concept. Here's a quote that deals with it a bit more from Steal Like an Artist. Chew on one thinker you really love. Study everything there is to know about that thinker. Then find 3 people that thinker loved and find out everything about them. Repeat this as many times as you can. So that's the idea. If there's someone you follow or someone or an e-learning designer that you really look up to and that you aspire to be like, study everything you can about them, and somewhere along the way, you're going to learn who they learn from, and you're going to learn who they look up to. Then you study everything there is to know about them, and you can imagine how that starts building and building and building, and then you have this big background of all of these thinkers behind you, and you're kind of choosing your own creative family tree. So I love this concept. It caused me to think differently about this stuff. So check out the book. There are a lot of really cool ideas like this. And then final thoughts. Get out there and get inspired. Make sure you grab this book if you want a nice quick read and you want to feel more inspired in your day-to-day. I'm going to include a link to it in the comments. Don't resign yourself to building a knockoff. Maybe it'll get you a quick win, but it also could have a really big cost, like getting you blocked from certain companies who are thinking it's a little too close to plagiarism. And if you are out there getting inspired and you're building cool stuff and you want to see cool stuff that other people are building to help give you ideas of what you could do, join us in the community. We're constantly sharing e-learning projects there. There are a lot of people doing really strong work. We'd love to see what you're working on too. So you can sign up there at devlinpeck.com/ID or use the link in the description. So thanks for making it to the end, and I will see you in the next video.